Hello students, welcome to the 54th session of the novel White Sargasso Sea. In this particular session, we will learn about the themes that engulf the novel. The first theme that we very obviously find after the reading of the novel is the oppression, slavery, and entrapment. The Emancipation Act, although has freed the slaves by the time of Antoinette's childhood, compensation has not been granted to the island's black population. This led to oppression, hostility, resentment between servants and their white employers. Enslavement shapes many of the relationships in Reese's novel, not just those between blacks and whites. Annette feels helplessly imprisoned at Colibri Estate after the death of her husband, repeating the word marooned over and over again. Likewise, Antoinette is doomed to form of an enslavement in her love and dependency upon her husband in legal and financial matters. Both of them lack the freedom of movement and making their own decision. For Annette, this results in the loss of her son and her descent into madness. Even for Antoinette, the result is similar but harsher. Women's dependence on fathers and husbands represents a figurative slavery that is made literal in Antoinette's ultimate physical abuse. The second important theme that we come across is the British imperialistic decline or colonialism. The text reveals the downfall of English colonialism in the Caribbean, a process that began with the abolition of slavery. Much of the descriptive detail in the work serves to underscore this theme. For example, Colibri Estate has fallen into a state of utter disarray, and Antoinette says that she did not remember the place when it was prosperous. Throughout the work, we see the English struggling to maintain their tenuous grasp over the island, while simultaneously grappling with the reality that this domain is very different from Europe. In the same way, Rochester's intense need to control Antoinette represents the British fight to maintain economic and legal control over an area which they considered their territory. Third important theme is that of nostalgia. Nostalgia plays an important role in the text. My fathers, visitors, horses, feeling safe in bed, all belong to the past, Antoinette says wistfully on the very first page. And throughout the story, she longs for a return to what she remembers as the innocent and happy days of her girlhood. She remembers Colibri as having a garden as large and beautiful as a garden in the Bible. But she laments that over time it has gone wild. The fourth important theme that we should understand is that of the alienation of the other. The notion of the minority as other is an important theme of post-colonial studies. Both the black majority and white minority on the island marginalize Antoinette and her Creole family, making them outsiders. As a result, they live in a state of almost complete social isolation. Now, we are marooned, Antoinette's mother says after the death of her horse. It prevents her from leaving the grounds of the family's estate. Later, she repeats that they are abandoned, lied about, helpless. Even though she marries to get out of this predicament, Antoinette finds herself in the same position as Rochester's wife. The fifth important theme that we see is that of the patriarchal tyranny. The subjugation of women to male authority is an important theme in both Charlotte Bronte's 19th century novel and Jean Rhys's 20th century revision. Like Bronte, Rhesus illustrates the painfully limited role of women in Victorian society. Antoinette, for example, is unable to free herself from Rochester brutality because she has no financial independence. When she married him, all of the money in her dowry was given to him without condition or stipulation. Rochester represents the patriarchal tyrants, with the exception of Christophene. Men deprive all of the female characters in the text, something the writer clearly finds deplorable. The sixth important theme that we ought to understand is that of the corrupting power of money. Money is the medium by which a new and legalized form of slavery has been instituted on the island, even after the emancipation has been granted by the British government. The incidents in which financial inequality sullies the emotional relationships between characters are innumerable. Tia steals Antoinette's pennies. Rochester marries Antoinette for her dowry and pays Amelie for sleeping with him. Daniel tries to extort money from Rochester in exchange for his silence. And even Antoinette attempts to use her pounds to convince Christophene to perform a black magic ritual. We see the characters, those in power, lord their wealth over others who are less fortunate. The seventh important theme is that of the complexity of racial identity. Race and the intricacies of the Jamaica social hierarchy play an important role in the development of the novel's main themes. Whites, born in England, are distinguished from the white Creoles, descendants of Europeans who have lived in the West Indies for one or more generations. Christophene, for instance, stands apart from the Jamaican servants because she is originally from the French Caribbean island of Martinique. Furthermore, there is a large mixed race population as white slave owners throughout the Caribbean and the Americas were notorious for raping and impregnating female slaves. Sandy and Daniel Cosway, two of Alexander Cosway's illegitimate children, both occupy this middle ground between black and white society. The eighth important theme happens to be that of rejection and identity. The first words of the text, they say, when trouble comes, close ranks. But we are not in their ranks, reflect Antoinette's feeling of being an outsider. The outsider status is predicated on a number of issues, including the problem of the place. Annette, Antoinette's mother, is a Creole from Martinique and speaks French. The white people in Jamaica never accept her because of her outsider status as a francophone. She is also much younger than her husband and extremely attractive, which makes the women uncomfortable. The black people do not accept Annette and her family because they were slave owners. The next important underlying theme that we find in the novel happens to be that of female madness. Annette displays her instability over and over in the first part of the text. First, as a recluse at Colibri, and later as Fiend who tries to kill her husband. Yet, Antoinette's mental breakdown is not only the result of her hereditary susceptibility. Even the circumstances of Antoinette's upbringing and marriage, in particular her confinement in the attic in the last section, contribute to her deterioration. Rhesus hints that insanity is at least in part a condition constructed by those in power to subordinate their inferiors. Hence, female madness is closely related to patriarchy. The last important theme that we see in this particular novel happens to be that of women, marriage, and power, all interrelated. With the loss of her husband and the ending of slavery, she is in a grave financial position. When her horse is killed and doctor declares Pierre untreatable, Annette falls into a state of despair. She feels trapped and powerless. This feeling is enhanced by the fact that she had come to Jamaica from Martinique in order to marry her husband. Annette is therefore left alone with two children. Annette is anxious to go to England and meet with the doctors in the hope of helping Pierre. She begs Mr. Mason to leave Colibri, but he refuses. This becomes the source of many arguments between the couple. Ultimately, Annette has no choice but to stay with Mr. Mason and do as he wishes. Without him, she and her children would find themselves in the same state of despair they were in before Annette married Mr. Mason. It is only through marriage to Mr. Mason that her hope is restored. In this novel, marriage serves to be a handcuff to women and leave them powerless, and it works as a symbol of the relationship between European powers and the colonies they established in the West Indies, which were rendered to be powerless by means of physical force, brute strength, or, in this instance, matrimony. Thank you.